Welcome, everybody. My name is Gail Pearlman. I'm an associate at Counsel Baradel, Kosmerl, and Nolan in Annapolis, Maryland. Welcome to 30 Tips in 30 Minutes for Bar Exam Prep. Joining me today are Thomas Kim and Meredith Parnell. Thomas is an associate with Davis, Wright, Tremaine in Portland, Oregon, and Meredith is an associate with Crowell and Mooring in Washington, D.C. So the tips today to help you prepare for the bar exam are going to cover study schedules, mindset and attitude, practice tests, exam week, and exam day. So Meredith is going to get us started with tips 1 through 6.
All right, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Meredith, and the first tip is to create a schedule. So this, I think, both means the actual schedule for the type of material that you'll be studying. If you're doing a bar prep review course, that oftentimes the course itself will do that for you. But I think for me, it also meant just looking ahead at my personal schedule over the upcoming months and, making sure that I knew the major blocks of time that I would and wouldn't be studying. The second tip is to know your study style. Everyone has a different study style, and you want to do what works for you. For me, I found that I learned best through doing practice under timed conditions, and then evaluating my work, evaluating how my practice tests went. That and handwriting out my notes worked the best for me. The third tip is to make sure that you make time for yourself. So, you can't study 24 hours a day. You have to sleep. You have to make sure that you're eating well. You have to make sure, that you are getting exercise. At least those were things that mattered for me as I studied. If I don't exercise relatively regularly, then I'm, grumpy and not focused. So the study schedule can be so intense. You really have to be proactive about carving out time for yourself. The fourth tip I have is to coordinate your bar review schedules. I already talked about this a little bit, but you want to make sure that you are mapping the schedule that the bar review course gives you against your own personal schedule. I'm a parent, and so my personal experience with this tip was that I was just unable to do the whatever it was, like 8 hours a day, 7 days a week schedule that the bar course gave me. And so it was important for me to know that going in, because there was just no way I was going to be able to put in the hours that the course demanded. And so I was able to adjust a little bit based on, comparing the bar review schedule against my personal obligations. Fifth tip is to decompress. So build in a few decompression days to accommodate the unexpected and let your brain process the information. We'll probably cover this later in the session, but I think this is especially important as you get closer to the bar exam. You just can't cram in things at the last minute, and taking time off from studying, both at the end but also scattered throughout, I would say at least once a week, is important, I think, for your long-term information retention. And then the sixth study schedule tip is to know your study area, to have an area that allows you to be comfortable, not necessarily your bed or somewhere like that. Mine was the kitchen table, but have a place that works for you, where you can write and have a comfortable seat and spend a lot of time. So those are my tips. I'm going to pass it off to Thomas to talk about mindset and attitude.
Thank you, Meredith. Tip number 7 is committing to pass. So taking a step back, this is the very beginning of the bar prep study season. And so, really before, you jump into the materials, really committing to pass, and tell yourself that you're going to do everything that you can so that you can pass the bar. So that when the time comes, when I guess, quote unquote temptation comes to go hang out or check out a new restaurant or new bar or, this party and that, because you've decided it will be helpful, and it'll be easier for you to say no to those and then really committing to studying and therefore passing. And then the next tip is staying positive. Sounds like a very simple tip, and it is. And this will help you throughout the entire study process. There are enough folks out there with negative attitudes that having a statement, positive attitude will help you lighten the mood a little bit. You will be studying the same amount, but this helps you remember that you not only have the skills, but you will pass. Telling yourself that you will pass. And the next tip is being yourself. And this is similar to the last tip of staying positive. It's so very easy during this bar prep season to compare yourself to your colleagues at the law school, or colleagues who graduated with you, because quite frankly, this is the only topic that you talk about, because it's the only thing on your mind. And again, we all have different strengths and different weaknesses. You got through law school fine, you graduated, otherwise you would not be taking the bar. So remember that you got everything you have. You got enough strength to graduate law school, and you will carry that on, continuing to be yourself to pass the bar as well. And tip number 10, we call it facing the task. Facing the task. This is also one of those tips that, have you take a step back and reminding yourself that, first of all, you got accepted to law school years ago, right? 3-4 years ago. And not only you got accepted, but you did so well that they let you graduate. So remembering all of the things that you did well, and that this is an opportunity that you continue to get to do. So you will face the task, but it's not something you have to do, but it's something you get to do. A change of mindset, similar to staying positive. And the next tip is keep practicing. Don't get discouraged if those practice test scores are not so hot. I recall my practice test and even those essays, depending on which bar prep course you use, but this graded essays that I would get back, it was horrible. I wasn't going to pass, it looked like. But don't get discouraged, because as you keep on practicing, as you continue to familiarize yourself with the correct answer and how the bar examiners want to see, you will get better and better. Your answers will become more like the answers that gets points awarded. So keep practicing. And tip number 12 is, sometimes asking for help. It's really tough to ask for help, because all of this is on us, and we get to dictate the time, and we get to put in the amount of energy that we put in. But depending on different courses, they have different resources available where you can ask for specific help and ask different sort of questions. And also remember, the colleagues that you graduated with are also going to be your resources and your help. Form a discussion group, form a study group, or even during lunch or dinner, whenever you have the time, touch base with your colleagues so that you can get the help you need. So don't feel like you don't have the help there. You need the help, and everyone needs the help, and it's in a way of a community of helping one another. So for tip number 13, I'll pass it on.
Thanks, Thomas. So tip number 13, which I think ties in really well with 11 and 9, and also the upcoming 17. Take many tests. Take as many practice tests as possible. At a minimum, you should be taking, if you're doing a review course, you should at minimum be taking the number of practice tests that they're assigning or adding to your schedule. You will be able to track your progress. You'll be able to identify where you need to focus more, what you've already got down pat. And it's really important. What I found super helpful was always review the test. Maybe not immediately, but always take a break for lunch, go for a run, come back, sit down, look at what you got wrong, and read the right answer, and identify what you got wrong and why, so that you can start correcting it going forward. And if you keep practicing, like with the essays also, which I'll talk about in a second, I would be getting those back also from the people who would grade them through the prep course that I did. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is terrible. But you've got to remember to be yourself. You can't compare yourself to other people. These are human beings, not a computer, usually looking at your essays and giving feedback. So take the feedback for what it is and apply it, but don't let it discourage you too much. But the more you practice, the more you improve, and that is key. For the next tip number 14, determining your strengths and weaknesses. So you're going to use those practice tests to determine those, focus on the weaknesses and maintain your strengths. So like I was saying before, if you look at what you got wrong and you look at why, you'll be able to correct it going forward, but don't stop working on the places where you're already proficient. Make sure you keep those in your rotation of flashcards or whatever it is you're using to kind of to study and test yourself. Tip number 15 is memorization. And one key part of taking the practice exams is so that you start to memorize the material. So like I was just saying, make flashcards. Use acronyms, either ones you've heard in law school or ones that you find from friends or online, or make up for yourselves. Songs, if they help you, whatever it's going to take to help you retain the information. Your brains work in mysterious ways. And, you get that earworm, that song that you can't get out of your head, or the flashcards, especially if you're a visual learner. Those are the types of things that will help you memorize things that help make the tests, both the practice test and on test day. It just kind of keeps you moving and keeps you going and keeps you focused. For the next tip, review everything. Always, always, always review the answers on your practice tests, even the ones you got right. So I focused before on look at why you got a wrong answer in the multiple choice when you're doing a practice test. But don't skip over the ones you got right. You still want to see. It reinforces learning what they're looking for, learning what the examiners are looking for is a big part of when you're stuck between two answers, picking one and picking a better one. That can come from remembering and learning what they're looking for. So by looking at wrong answers and at the correct answers, you'd be surprised how often you get something right but didn't realize why it was right. At least that was my experience. The next tip, number 17, research essay questions. Find out what bar examiners are looking for on the essay portions of the exam. Again, I was getting really harsh feedback from the people scoring my practice essays, and it was very deflating at some points. And again, that's why you've got to stay positive and, face the task and from all of these other mindset and attitude tips as well. But by looking at past answers, and I don't know about in other jurisdictions in Maryland, they had two different kinds of acceptable answers where people, scored well enough to pass. One was a short 2-paragrapher and one would be, a page and a half long. They both were acceptable. And that way, when you get to an essay question where you're less familiar with the material, you'll remember what you saw that was acceptable in another instance, and you'll know at a minimum, if you put English on the page, you get 1 or 2 points. But it's all about the point hunt when you come to the essays, and remembering and seeing and reviewing what acceptable answers looked like in the past is invaluable. Tip number 18, prepare for everything. Don't think you can pass the bar exam by doing well on just a certain number of subjects. You need to be prepared for anything. A lot of the bar prep courses give you percentages of, and I guess with the UBE jurisdictions being more and more popular now, I don't know how true this is, but when I took it, Maryland was still a Maryland jurisdiction. I took the Maryland State Bar exam. They told us how often, percentage-wise, certain subjects were on the bar exam, and when was the last year they were on that they were tested. And the year after me, everybody said they had 2 questions in a certain subject that was tested like 9% of the time and had been done 2 years before. So make sure you cover everything, the things you're familiar with, the things you know nothing about because you never even heard of them until bar prep. Do it all. And before I hand it back over to Meredith, a quick point, and I was telling my fellow panelists this before we started. I had a spinal cord injury while I was studying for the bar exam. I wouldn't let them operate on me until I had taken it because I was really stubborn. Now, that's not to say I recommend doing something that's silly, but what I'm saying is these are all tips that helped me, and if I can pass with a spinal cord injury, it's totally doable, and it takes commitment, and it takes, looking at the tips and making use of them and utilizing all of the tools at your disposal. So now I'm going to hand it back over to Meredith.
All right, great, thank you. The 19th tip is to spend the last week brushing up. Your study course should direct you to do this, but I think the key takeaway is that this last week just can't be a cram session. You just have to look over the subjects that you want to refocus on, as opposed to trying to learn new material. I think it's really important in general to just trust the process, trust the work that you've put in, and not overthink the few days before the exam. The next tip is to confirm logistics. So you want to finalize exactly where you're going, where you're parking, what the lunch plan is, directions to get there, things like that. What this tip is talking about in the PowerPoint here is the day of logistics. I can tell you a personal story about a pitfall I had in confirming logistics as well a couple weeks in. So I realized 2 weeks before the exam that I had missed a step in registering to use my laptop during the exam, and I was going to have to handwrite the essays. And I was devastated at the time, really upset about it for about 48 hours. I tried to sort of find some wiggle room in the system. Of course, there wasn't any. And so, in the end, it ended up being fine. I switched my practice to handwriting. I handwrote the exam and I passed the exam. But I was so thankful that I had taken a step to confirm. I was looking ahead to confirm the day of logistics a couple weeks ahead of time and realized my mistake and was able to go through, sort of the emotional up and down of that 2 weeks before the exam instead of the morning of the exam. For those of you that are handwriting, as an aside, I actually think it's there are pros to doing it, and it's a great way to take the exam. The next tip, the 21st tip, is to get plenty of rest. So, the BART test is a test of endurance as much as it is a test of knowledge. It really is a marathon instead of a sprint. So this tip is true throughout your entire study, but especially in the last week. If you're operating on a sleep deficit as you go into that exam, you're just not going to have the type of recovery or judgment or time management that you're going to have if you're well rested. Tip 22, take more tests. So just as many practice tests as you can do. Take all the tests that your bar exam course will give you, and like Gail said, try to review the results as much as you can. I really think this is a critical way to learn to manage your time and to take the surprise out of what the actual test will be like. Tip 23 is to make condensed outlines. So the last few days before the exam, it's too late to try to reread in depth all of the long outlines that you have used to this point. I think you're really at this point trying to boil down portions of the subjects that you want to focus on into the most high level, tips. And so you use your time to make those condensed outlines and broad brushstroke outlines, as opposed to getting into the details of every sort of nuance or exception to the rule or whatever. And then the last tip I have here about exam week is to stay focused. Inevitably, you will have some point during this week where you are just crumbling under the boredom of your June and July having been focused on studying for the bar. For me personally, it was brutal to be sitting inside doing this type of studying while it was gorgeous weather outside. People were enjoying their summer, but really is hopefully something that you're only going to do once or twice. So stay focused. Don't let yourself get burned out or distracted. It's going to be over before you know it, and then you will never have to think about it again, hopefully. So those are the exam week tips. Now, Thomas, if you'll take us home by covering the exam day tips.
Sounds good. So next tip is to dress for success. And what we mean by success is to dress in layers so that you are in control of the temperature in a way. You see, the testing room can be, all different temperatures. I mean, it's just like when we took the LSAT 4 years ago. You see, my testing room, for instance, in Portland, Oregon, it was really cold in the morning, and it was like a fall weather. And then afternoon, it really warmed up. And by dressing in layers, I dressed in like 3 different layers, and with all the zip ups so that I can easily take it off or take it on, put it on during the exams without distracting others or without spending much time or effort during the exam. So really, that's the key. And also, on a related note for dressing, if you're staying at a hotel, conference hotel, to take the exam, which was my case, you see the hotel room temperature can vary as well. So really, bring an extra hoodie or something like that, just to be sure if the AC is broken while it's turned on or something like that. So bring extra layers. Make educated guesses is the next tip, and this is probably one of the most practical ones while you're taking the exam, right? You've already studied, and while you're taking the exam, this is about getting those points. So, even if you don't know the law, then you can, on an essay portion, feel free to make up a law and then write the analysis that you would based on this law that you made up. It sounds silly, but at the end of the day, you can get a few points from the analysis portion as well as, conclusion or your general framework of the argument. So don't be so alarmed when you don't recall a particular law. And similarly, that was my case. There was a family law question which I know nothing about. I did not emphasize that area while studying, and of course, I freaked out for a few seconds when I got a family law question, and I just made up something and then wrote an analysis as if that law was a legitimate law, and I know that I got some points there. So make educated guesses. And tip number 27 is, don't freak out. I mean, it makes no rational sense to freak out. It adds nothing. It has no value for freaking out. So, being in the positive and relaxed mindset and, focusing on channeling your energy on doing your best will be the most practical way to spend your emotional energy. So really, objectively, try not to freak out. And tip number 28 is to arrive at the exam center early, so that you are not freaking out about a traffic situation last minute or waiting in a long line to get breakfast, or whatever it is. So, when you get there early, that allows you to be ready to go for the time being. And as Meredith discussed, follow the rules on what you can bring. Check with the bar examiners on all of the things you can bring in terms of the snacks or even watch. I mean, those are easy mistakes to make. And having a lunch plan really helped my case because my lunch was only 1 hour. I knew that I didn't have time to go out. So during lunch, I had bought something and it was in the hotel room waiting. So arrive early with everything that you need to bring. And tip number 29 is watching the clock while you're taking the exam. And of course, it's a no-brainer, but it's just like when you're taking the practice exam. Make sure you are aware of the time you're spending on a particular question and about how much time you have left, and make sure you're on a budget in terms of the time budget that you've practiced and that you are following through. Otherwise, of course, the worst case scenario is that you run out of time to write one of the essays or answer some of the questions that you never get to, when those could have been easier points. And this ties in with number 30. It's about passing. It's about getting those points awarded so you can pass. So all of the tips that we've covered, 29 of them, all lead to this number 30. Passing is all that matters, and you've got this. You had the knowledge, experience, and the skills, and of course, in the next couple of months, as you study diligently, you got this. So that's our charge for you. You got this.
Thank you so much, Thomas and Meredith. We've got time for questions if anybody has any. I believe there is a method for you guys to be able to type in any questions you have, and they'll show up on our screen, and we can ask our panelists the questions. Let's see. Okay. It doesn't look like we have any questions. So thank you all for participating today and for joining us. And for those of you listening to the recording at a later date, thank you. And I hope that you got something out of this and you're able to take this all with you. And good luck. You definitely do have this. You've got this. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks again.